Has anyone ever stopped what they're doing long enough to pay attention to that inner monologue? The voice in your head that seems to criticize your every move, tell you what to do, and even narrate your every move. It seems like you at first look, doesn't it? Like how your very being is encased in contemplation. However, prominent 20th century psychologist Carl Jung argued that we should seek out the quiet mystery of the soul rather than just the noise on the surface. Using a stunning array of understanding the intricate connection between that inner monologue and our genuine identity. The person we think we are is frequently an elaborate facade our minds put up to hide our true selves from an unforgiving world. According to Jung, the human mind is not just a collection of thoughts, but a multi-layered cosmos of awareness where our authentic selves, separate from our egos and the masks we put on for other people, dwell. The one whose opinion we frequently hold as a lot of the time, the voice of me is just an ego projection, an adaptive mechanism that, according to Jung, is vital for staying alive but severely restricts one's capacity for self-actualization. If that internal monologue isn't you, then what is? Jung posits that the ego mediates between our internal mental processes and the external environment. The problem is that sometimes what starts out as a connection becomes a barrier that prevents us from experiencing our inner lives. These negative emotions, such as fear, shame, and preconceived notions, seep into this inner monologue that says nothing about who we really are, rather than the disjointed murmurs of our past selves. It carries the burden of our upbringing, cultural scripts, societal expectations, and traumatic experiences. Its message is seldom inspired by the soul, even though it uses our own tone. Our shadow is the source. Jung proposed this idea so that we can give a name to the parts of ourselves that are hidden or rejected. These wounded realities, long-forgotten yearnings, and disowned emotions. The inner monologue is frequently a reflection of this shadow, a jumble of ideas we were too chicken to. We were never taught to embrace difficulty or our feelings. Consider the following scenario. You're having an internal monologue that keeps saying, "You're not enough." From where did this notion originate? Is it the scar from when you were a kid? Something that reflects the unrealistic expectations of society, such as a ghostly voice that pretends to be yours, but was actually once someone else's. The internal chatter isn't something to be silenced, but rather understood and observed, not as the whole. In Jung's invitation to rise above it. Complete recovery and rehabilitation. Feeling free to question and expose this voice for what it often is, a program rather than a truth, is the first step toward emotional liberation. Only through this hallowed practice of introspection can one's true identity start to rise to the surface. There is clarity beneath all the noise. There is liberation beneath the terror. Separating ourselves from the false belief that this voice defines us is the first step on the long road to individuation, the way to completeness. Along this road, we learn not only our true selves, but our true selves from the beginning, a conscious being linked to something bigger than themselves, rather than a captive of old habits. That which was never truly lost, but merely buried, the collective unconscious, the knowledge of the spirit. The real goal of life, according to Jung, is not to amass material possessions or escape pain, but to set out on a holy quest. A person's path to self-actualization. This road encourages us to reconcile every aspect of our minds, including the parts we've rejected, pushed aside, or terrified of in order to complete themselves. Our internal monologue is more than just noise. It can be quite annoying and even harsh at times. It serves as a guidepost leading us to the parts of ourselves that are still wounded and in need of attention, healing, and integration. Take Jung's advice. If you find yourself dwelling on your mistakes, it's time to figure out where that guilt is coming from. Underneath, what silent lesson resides? Which unacknowledged truths persist? How can you, instead of trying to bury the memory, reconcile with it and let it mold you intrinsically? By taking this tack, your internal dialogue can develop into something more substantial than a critical feedback loop. It opens the door to more profound self-sufficiency. It shows how disjointed our inner lives are. Rather than seeing negative thoughts and harsh judgments as enemies, you should view them as opportunities to question where your pain is coming from. These ideas typically originate in the fragile ground of early experiences, such as hurts, emotional needs that were unfulfilled, or the conditioning of people in positions of power who insisted that, in order to fit in, you bury your true self. When we no longer identify with that voice, what then? According to Jung, this is the root cause of a lot of human suffering. Mistaking the ego's voice for one's own. What you really are isn't that inner critic who says things like, "You're not good enough," in a low or high voice. It's a protective mechanism, a mental construct that shields you from the hurtful effects of being vulnerable, rejected, or failure. However, paradoxically, it is precisely that inner monologue that binds you to the scars that it is attempting to sidestep. Picture a common, approachable incident. You mess up on a job. In an instant, your thoughts explode. You failed miserably. You will never be sufficient. According to Jung, this doesn't sound like you being yourself. It's your wounded ego trying to protect you, but it's actually hurting you more. However, when you opt to watch rather than react, a significant change starts to take place. You start to perceive in that instant of calm the voice for what it truly is, a memory, an instinct, and not an expression of your reality. Bearing witness is a potent act. However, bravery is required. This calls on us to look within and confront the things we've been avoiding for so long. Jung likened this to descending into the underworld, a metaphor for facing one's shadow, that secret place where one hides the aspects of oneself they are too scared to own. There's tremendous light, though, in that shadow. All of our emotions, from anger to passion to despair, are housed in the shadow. Uniqueness, our long-lost aspirations. Both our pain and our potential for growth stem from the things we push down. Think of the individual who blocks out ideas because they are afraid others will criticize them. Despite how much that critical inner voice begs to differ, the truth remains. You're not talented. In its fearful plea for healing, the shadow is making its voice heard. One does more than just triumph over insecurity when they face their fears head-on and create anyway, reclaiming a sacred portion of. They are. According to Jung, the shadow isn't bad. What we really have within us is the unloved, the rejected, the lost, and the unknown. When we give in to self-doubt and investigate its roots, we often find that the things we dread the most are actually the ones we need to incorporate the most. Plus, we accomplish more than merely stilling our minds when we do this. It doesn't affect us. Keep in mind that we are not speaking for the group. We're the ones that pick it up. Emergence of the witness, soul, and self. Soundtrack, the ego's incessant desire to. It's easy to create the impression of distance when you control and define. In a hushed tone, it suggests that we are estranged from everything, other people, the natural world, and most painfully, our own spirit. But Jung taught that on a fundamental level. The fact is that this is false. There's a huge, old reservoir under the surface of each of our unique identities. The collective unconscious was what he referred to, a common ground where symbolic meaning, archetypes, and shared human experiences unite us. When we tune out the constant chatter in our heads. As we delve into this more profound stream of consciousness, we start to tap into a knowledge that goes beyond our own past. Just picture this. The inner critic who claims you can't do it might not even be you. It might be an echo, a long-suppressed dread that has been handed down through the years. Fear can be turned into creative energy and purpose when faced with that voice from a place of inner clarity and self-awareness. Instead of being an obstacle, it becomes a means to genuine expression. However, on the path to greater self-awareness, understand that the internal monologue doesn't have to go away suddenly, and we should keep that in mind. Instead of viewing the ego as something to be destroyed, Jung believed it should be integrated. After all, there's a function for the ego. We can't let it control us. It just helps us navigate the physical world. Our sense of self, our fundamental identity, must counteract its dominance. This delicate alchemy is necessary for individuation, which is Jung's word for wholeness. It begs us to recognize and embrace the rejected aspects of ourselves without feeling guilty or condemned. Consider the insecurities that frequently drive our internal monologue. Maybe you'd think it's a defect at first. Nevertheless, take a closer look. Feeling uncertain might be a sign that you need to give more consideration to your plans, be more cautious, or take a step back before acting. This is how it transforms into a guide, not an oppressor. Jung encourages us to learn about and make space for these feelings instead of trying to suppress them. One of the easiest and most effective ways to quiet our minds is to practice reflective thinking, something that Jung thought was really important. The first step is to become aware of a thought pattern, such as "I'm not enough," and to ask, where did this come from? Do I actually own this? Is it something I internalized from my upbringing, my culture, or an event I failed to fully comprehend? This is a liberating moment, this moment of inquiry. It creates a vast chasm between you and the idea itself, sufficient for self-awareness, agency, and empathy. Imagine a river in full flood. When you're in the middle of it, fighting against the flow, it feels all-consuming and chaotic. However, a different perspective emerges when one steps out onto the bank and observes from the shoreline. Even though you're no longer submerged in the river, you can still see it flowing by. The strength of self-reflection is shown here. You are able to observe your thoughts as they go through your mind without becoming attached to them. You must keep in mind that while they do contribute to your life, they do not define you. Really are. The role of the unconscious is crucial in this unfolding. Jung likened it to a huge living ocean, a storehouse of memories, impulses, and emotions that influence our lives in subtle ways, frequently without our knowledge. A lot of what you hear as your internal monologue is really your unconscious mind trying to get its message through. Among its most sincere manifestations is the dream state. If we pay attention to our dreams, according to Jung, we can start to decipher the meaning of our internal monologue. When you dream, for instance, of being confined to a room without windows, if you often feel trapped by repetitive or limiting thoughts or patterns when you're awake, this archetype may reflect that sensation. Instead of writing off such a dream, Jung would advise you to interpret it as a symbol showing you exactly where your psyche is calling for freedom. When we become aware of that realization, a change starts to occur. The shackles are loosened. We take back control. Doing so allows us to tap into something greater than ourselves, rather than merely calming the ego. Our priorities start to coincide not only with our individual reality, yet in step with the universal beat of our shared spirit. Sound. According to Jung, we experience a profound sense of oneness with a power greater than ourselves the moment we are able to rise above the superficial level of our own thoughts and feelings. We come into contact with the holy in this stillness beyond the din, the kind of bond with significance and direction that one's inflated ego can never create. Everything changes when there's a deep alignment with the collective unconscious and the deeper levels of the mind. There is no ignore the idea that we are a collection of isolated individuals fighting an uphill battle. Rather, we realize how truly interdependent we are on one another, on the natural world, and on the beat of life itself. The internal world isn't the only thing this insight changes. It changes our love, speech, relationships, and way of life. Unchecked mental chatter contributes to the perpetuation of disconnection. It convinces us that no one else shares our pain and struggles, and that our struggles are insurmountable. On the inside, it traps us in a story about being alone. However, according to Jung, we can discover something revolutionary by accessing the collective unconscious, realizing that we are not alone in experiencing the range of emotions that we do. They form a small part of the enormous fabric that is the human experience. Not only does this insight let go of judgment, but it also gives rise to compassion for both other people and ourselves, especially for the parts we've left behind. What we once believed set us apart is actually what brings us together, as we come to realize. Consider partnerships. As an illustration, some examples of our internal monologue that Jung calls projections are, I'm not enough for this person, or they just don't understand me. In order to protect itself from the pain of rejection, the ego creates these narratives. Yet, this action creates unseen barriers between us and the people we care about. Recognizing these ideas for what they really are, reverberations of past hurts, gives us agency to respond differently. Envision yourself embroiled in a dispute with a loved one. You may feel a strong urge from within to protect yourself, provide an explanation for your behavior, or even retaliate in order to maintain your dignity. However, the true catalyst may not be this very second if you take a moment to reflect within. It's like a hidden wound from a long-ago hurt, a script written by an insecure ego. And that change in perspective alters all. You respond from a place of presence rather than pain. You create room for empathy rather than sustaining disconnection. This type of introspection, Jung emphasized, involves seeing projections, confronting the unconscious. The path to healing oneself and one's relationships begins with choosing authenticity over defense. Is the path from egocentric response to empathetic comprehension. In doing so, we learn to listen to life rather than narrate it. Sound. Jung also mentioned synchronicity, an enigmatic phenomenon. Those irrational occurrences that surprise us with their timing and convey a message we can feel deep within us, defying all logic. There is more to these significant coincidences than meets the eye. They communicate with the people of the subliminally guiding us toward our greater purpose through the collective unconscious, incorporating clues into our everyday experiences. Maybe you were at a crossroads in your life, uncertain of which way to turn, when someone spoke of a book, a dream, or a personal story that spoke directly to your spirit. According to Jung, this is not a coincidence. This is the process of alignment. Listen for the voice of your mind as it guides you back to who you truly are, piercing through the illusion of reality. Something miraculous happens when we start to believe in these coincidences, reveals itself. When we let go of our ego's stranglehold and the incessant need to dictate every detail of our lives, we make room for the sacred rhythm of existence. That doesn't imply we give up on using our common sense or logic. This implies that we are welcoming a new participant to the discussion, our intuition, that nagging sense that is linked to a source that predates our rational mind. Here we see the fine tango of free will and unconscious knowledge, of control and submission. Jung claims that this equilibrium is a crucial component in the unfolding of one's true identity or individuation. But this is no easy ride. Bravery is required to tread this path because it leads into holy ground. Jung cautioned that those who aren't brave enough to deconstruct their egos, embrace their shadow selves, and open themselves to the collective unconscious would not make it on the path to integration. Keep an eye on it. It encourages us to face our beliefs, fears, and patterns head-on and to be open to change, to let go of our old selves, to start all over. However, there are incalculable benefits to embarking on this journey within. With this, you get more than just understanding. You get serenity, love, and the truth. When people stop putting on airs and start being truly present with one another, relationships blossom. When this happens, your life starts to feel more like a vocation than a performance. And it is through this holy unfolding that you learn the cosmos is not a random place. It reacts quickly. It will speak to you when you learn to tune out the mental chatter. Music, an effective and easily accessible method of expanding. One way to accomplish this inner work is by keeping a reflective journal. Allocate a brief period of time every day to jot down your feelings and ideas as they come to the surface. Avoid filtering. Make no effort to sound elegant or poetic. Embrace the freedom to express yourself freely on paper. By separating yourself from your inner monologue, even the most basic act of self-perception can have profound effects. As an alternative to listening to your thoughts race through your head, You could just sit back and watch the clouds float by, succumbing to its allure. Beliefs, emotional patterns, and stories that have subtly influenced your actions become apparent over time. For example, you may have noticed a recurring theme in your writing: the persistent feeling that you are inadequate. Rather than brushing this off as a sign of weakness, Jung wants you to consider, where did this voice begin? Was it planted in childhood by a parent's silence? Was it born in comparison, rejection, or praise that came only when you performed? These are not critiques, but rather inquiries into the origins of your self-pity. Instead of bringing shame, it brings freedom. By finding the source of your pain, you can start to regain the power it once took away. Jung's teachings aren't just theoretical. They are invitations to transformation. When we put his insights into practice, we find that they transform not only our thinking, but also our choices, our speech, our love, and our responses to life's challenges. By reestablishing our connection with our authentic selves, awakening to the dormant parts of ourselves is a result of becoming aware of the collective unconscious, which Jung described as a treasure trove of shared wisdom consisting of archetypes, symbols, and ancient energies. When we shed the ego's mask and tap into this unconscious source of knowledge, we start to live with clarity and congruence in our relationships, in our work, and even in the face of adversity. Psyche. Consider the archetype of the hero. It instills in us the bravery to confront hardship, to rise when we feel wounded. Conversely, the archetype of the sage awakens our inner knowing, the still voice that guides us back to wisdom when the world seems to be in chaos. Now, how can we access this deeper layer of meaning? One potent portal is the dream world. According to Jung, dreams are the unconscious mind's language, the soul communicating through symbols. If you dream about strolling through a four-bodied forest, for instance, this might not actually be something you should run away from, but rather a symbol of the unexplored territory within yourself. The forest serves as a reflection, probing, what aspect of your own being have you shunned? What secrets lie hidden beneath the surface? Thinking about these symbols does more than just stimulate the imagination. It opens a channel of communication with the hidden aspects of our soul. And when we do that, a sacred thing happens. We stop existing on the surface, start acting with more purpose, and remember who we were before this world came into being. Jung taught us that genuine psychological growth doesn't start with fixing ourselves, but with embracing all of who we are, flaws and all. This radical power of self-acceptance is one of the most important parts of his work. Music. Our inner dialogue tells us we shouldn't be who we are. We should be someone else, more polished, more attractive, and deserving of love. This mental chatter becomes a tyrant, echoing expectations that were never really ours. Most of us have been taught to bury our emotions, such as anger or fear, because we perceive them as wrong or weak. However, Jung posed a deeper question. What if these feelings, which we have been taught to fear or reject, became allies in the light when we stopped fighting them? This isn't about resignation, but about integration, about ending the internal civil war. Feelings aren't necessarily negative. They can be messengers from the soul requesting our attention. Anger, for example, could be a reaction to a boundary being crossed or a truth being suppressed. Fear, on the other hand, could be protecting a vulnerable aspect of ourselves that needs to be seen. When we approach these inner storms with curiosity rather than judgment, we can start to transform them. This includes turning pain into insight, reactivity into understanding, and, most importantly, shame into self-compassion. Our relationships become battlegrounds when we operate from ego. We defend, accuse, and perform. We seek validation and fear rejection. However, when we begin to anchor ourselves in the authentic self, our defenses soften. We feel safe enough to be vulnerable, to be honest, to be seen not as perfect but as whole. This deepens intimacy and attracts people who resonate with us. This shift is not limited to our inner world. It reshapes how we relate to others, authentically are, not behind the facade we present. Take this hypothetical situation. You and a close friend or partner are having a disagreement. Your thoughts may race to the following conclusions. They don't get me. I'm always the one who's wrong. Why even try? These thoughts aren't true. They're projections, echoes of old wounds. However, if you take a moment to pause, not to react, but to reflect, you might uncover something else, a wounded part of yourself begging for connection. Jung would say this is the moment of alchemy upon catching. Immerse yourself in the mental narrative and inquire, is this truly about them or about me? Jung envisioned a life without pain, but a life lived in relationship with it. A life where the mind no longer dictates our worth, but serves the soul. A life where mental chatter becomes a doorway, not a prison. You begin to dismantle the illusion. You speak not from pride, but from presence, not from fear, but from truth. And in doing so, you create space for understanding where there once was only conflict. This inner transformation is not a linear or quick process. Rather, it is a series of steps that must be taken step by step, with periods of breakthrough and then periods of reemergence of old patterns. This is not failure, but rather the natural progression of development. What counts is not perfection, but commitment to the unfolding process. And every step, no matter how small, is necessary for release from prison. Every step, no matter how tiny, brings us closer to the core we've buried under layers of conditioning, fear, and noise. One practical way to maintain this commitment is through daily visualization. Sit quietly for a few minutes first thing in the morning and picture yourself as you want to feel and be, not as someone you want to be or accomplish, as you navigate the day with grounded confidence, authenticity, and inner peace. This simple practice will reset your energy and align your choices with your authentic self. It's not about controlling. At the heart of Jung's approach is the integration of shadow and the invocation of archetypes, which are timeless forces that shape our behavior from the depths. When we befriend the shadow, we stop suppressing the very emotions that hold the key to our freedom. Anger, fear, and sadness are not defects to be ashamed of, but rather parts of who we are and how we live our lives. Imagine someone who has spent years repressing their fears. Those fears don't go away. They harden into chronic anxiety or paralyzing hesitation when faced with change. However, if that person were to face their fears head-on with presence and compassion, they would discover something sacred. Every negative emotion has a message to share. If we ignore or dismiss them, they will only change. When we turn toward our fears, we will find ways to overcome them. Sitting with fear without judging or trying to overcome it, but just listening, one may find an unfulfilled need, an ignored boundary, or a part of oneself that needs protection. At that moment, fear changes. It becomes a guide, not a prison. Archetypes, in contrast, are the patterns that reside within each of us. The hero, the sage, the lover, and the sovereign are all archetypes. They provide us with reflections and maps. When we confront challenges, we can embody the sage's tranquility. This is not. Imagine a scenario where you're dealing with a workplace conflict. Your ego may want to defend, prove, or withdraw. However, by intentionally tapping into the energy of the sovereign, an archetype of balanced leadership, you can respond with clarity, integrity, and poise. You stop being reactive and start being intentional, which changes everything. This shift isn't just internal. When you start living from this deeper place, your entire world changes around you. You make better decisions. You form stronger relationships, stronger bonds. You enter your life with an unshakable calm strength. And by doing so, you transcend the mental chatter and soar above it, led not by fear, but by your soul's voice. Musical. The regular practice of embracing your shadows and archetypes does more than change your inner world. It starts to mend your connection with the collective unconscious. You begin to perceive patterns, synchronicities, and significant coincidences that once seemed to be random. Little things happen. These aren't coincidences. They're signs from the deeper layers of reality that you're never really alone. You're part of something much bigger than your personal story. For instance, you might discover that right when you're at a crossroads, A conversation comes like medicine, or a book finds you at the right time. To Jung, these synchronicities were not accidents, but sacred signs, proof that you're connecting with your authentic path and opening. In order to align with the universal forces that are directing your journey, Carl Jung suggested engaging in simple yet profound practices like meditation, reflective journaling, and mindful observation of your emotions and thoughts. One effective method is to sit quietly, close your eyes, and observe your inner dialogue as it unfolds, without judgment or resistance. Let your thoughts float like clouds across your awareness sky. This will help you see clearly that you are not your mental noise, but rather, you are. Being a witness to it is not only calming, but also liberating. Being mindful of this fact trains your authenticity muscle and brings you back to your true self time and time again. Being consistent is key. With each deliberate breath, every small act of reflection deepens your integration. And as the days go by, something changes. The mental chatter loosens its grip, the voice of your ego grows quieter, and you begin to feel a deeper sense of peace and clarity emerging from within. This inner transformation goes outward, impacting not only your decisions, but also the vibe you bring to every encounter. When you live true to who you are, just being there can motivate and encourage others. Your light shines brightly, drawing others to engage in their own inner work. Working with archetypes and integrating your shadow not only changes your self-perception, but it also reimagines your worldview. When you live from your essence, you stop reacting on the fly due to insecurity or fear. Being grounded in your essence allows you to see the shared humanity in everyone you meet. You begin to understand that others are also navigating their own shadows, which softens your judgments and expands your compassion. For example, consider a moment when someone close to you criticizes or abandons you. This shows up in your relationships as greater empathy, emotional patience, and genuine connection. It's natural to react defensively when someone judges you unfairly. How dare they? Or they don't understand me, are common thoughts. However, taking a step back and looking deeper can reveal that their actions are driven by their own fears, unresolved pain, and projections. By shifting your perspective, you can transform a conflict into an opportunity for connection, even when your ego would have preferred distance. Jung also highlighted the importance of shadow work and archetypal awareness in shaping our decision-making processes. When you're in alignment with your inner truth, you make decisions from a place of soulful clarity rather than a place of fear or anxiety. For example, when you're contemplating a big life change, a new job, a move, or a relationship decision, your mind may race with questions like, what if I fail? What will people think? Am I even ready? However, these thoughts don't represent you. They're the ego's way of trying to keep you stuck in the familiar. When you align with your inner truth, you make decisions based on your values and principles, not on external factors. You can regain control over your choices by observing them instead of identifying with them. One technique that helps is to see the desired outcome as your authentic self. Close your eyes and imagine everything is flowing smoothly. Focus on the feeling, not the external outcome, but the inner sense of peace, alignment, and joy. This internal resonance will lead you to the right path and allow synchronicities to help. The more you practice this, the more you'll see that the choice is already made and everything is flowing smoothly. Once you incorporate this into your daily routine, you'll notice that your thoughts are becoming less distracting. They won't go away entirely, but they will lose some of their power over you. By choosing to watch your thoughts instead of reacting, you're reconnecting with your essence. As time goes on, this inward focus changes who you are and how you see the world. This transformation is both deeply personal and profoundly collective. According to Jung, we help elevate collective consciousness as we progress towards individuation. Living true to who you are isn't an isolated act. It's a chain reaction. When you show up as your truth, people feel it too. They start to wake up, not because you said it, but because you did it. Coming into your own isn't a destination, but a continuous dance with your ego, unconscious, and self. Every feeling, obstacle, and revelation is a part of this sacred unfolding. Some days you'll feel in tune with your truth and aligned, while other days the mental chatter will be a nuisance. That's normal. It's all right. Every little thing you do to be more aware is a little revolution. When you choose to reflect instead of react, it changes the energy around you. When you live from your essence, you empower others to transform their lives as well. This is the greatest gift you can offer the world. Carl Jung once said, as far as we can discern, the sole purpose of human existence is to kindle a light in the darkness. When you dedicate yourself to awakening, you become a beacon of light for both yourself and the world. May this be your lasting impact. Not an ideal life, but one lived with awareness. If this message touched you, if even a word reflected your inner journey, I encourage you to share your thoughts in the comments. Have you found a soul whose presence feels like home? Or are you still on the sacred path to finding yourself? Your unfinished story has the potential to illuminate someone else's shadow, the hidden beacon they were seeking. And if you know someone who is quietly battling the false belief that love must be painful, that giving up oneself is the cost of belonging, or that they are undeserving of tranquility, please share this video with them. I need your help reaching those who need to know that genuine love does not require us to shrink. True connection does not demand that we give up our souls. And the most important union we can ever achieve is with our own inner truth. So, before you depart, I encourage you to subscribe and turn on notifications. In this space, we delve into the depths of the mind, uncovering its hidden architecture, the unconscious's murmurs, and how relationships reflect our personal growth. If you have any questions, themes, or wounds that you would like us to address in future videos, please leave them below. Your presence here is vital, and your voice is not only welcome, but essential. Thank you for coming not only to this video, but to all of our videos. Instead of focusing on the outside world, devote yourself to the sacred labor of remembering who you truly are. Keep this in mind at all times. Your soul will know when the right person comes along, not because of fear, but because of peace. Until then, let your closest relationship be the one you cultivate within. That's where everything begins.